a COVID-19 environment. And we really have some objectives tonight for our conference, for our webinar. But before we look at some of those, I'm going to ask at this time our president, Dr. Shirley Curtis, to do a welcome and introduction. Dr. Curtis, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second webinar for the year. But we are hoping that this is not your second webinar with us. In fact, it was last year, this time, when we started doing webinars, May 2020. And what a year it has been. 2020, which was supposed to be the year of the nurse and the midwife. Well, we didn't have to do much because the whole world was looking at us, whether we wanted to be in the spotlight or not. So 2020 was a year when we were in the spotlight. We were being highlighted. We were being appreciated. Sometimes we were being ostracized, but we were definitely in the spotlight as midwives and as nurses in our countries and even in the region. And even as we moved into 2021, COVID-19 is still with us. The effects of COVID-19 is still with us. And one of those things that came along with COVID-19 was an increase in domestic violence. And so the Education Committee of CRMA, we came together and when we thought about what it is that we would like to share with the midwives of the region at this time, we thought that we should address domestic violence in a COVID environment. And tonight we have some very experienced, very knowledgeable persons who are going to present to us. And we hope that we all take in the information and that we utilize it and that our clients will get the best. And not only our clients, don't forget your colleagues. So when you're looking for domestic violence, don't just think it's going to be in your with your clients. So your colleagues and your family members, that this information, that we can use it for the betterment of women and men in our region. And I just want to I hope I haven't missed anybody. We'd like to welcome the Bahamas, and we see a lot of the different islands represented from the Bahamas, Guyana, Jamaica, Belize, St. Kitts, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, Antigua, and British Virgin Islands. They're the ones I caught so far. I'm going to go back in the chat. And if you haven't put your country in the chat yet, please do so that you can be recognized as being present to this particular session. We'd like to say thank you even from now for our presenters who are going to come to us and to give us what they have prepared for us. I'd just like to say that now we are moving into May being Nurses and Midwives Month again. May 5th is International Day of the Midwife. So we trust that all of the countries are gearing up to do something in this COVID environment. We can't let COVID rob us of 2 years of celebrations. So let us try to do something within our region to celebrate the midwives within our regions. This year, the topic is follow the data, invest in midwives. And in order to follow the data, that means we have to be documenting what it is that we do so that there can be a paper trail that says that, yes, midwives are contributing to the health and the welfare of women and adolescents and families within our region. So welcome. And please, as the presenters present, if you have questions, please type them in the chat. Type them in the chat. We have persons who will be writing your questions down, and at the end, they will be tabling the questions to our two able presenters to answer the questions. On top of that, there is a Google form that we will be putting the link in the chat. It's there already, but I'll be repeating it as we go through the night so that at the end of the presentation, you can fill out your Google form. It's like an evaluation form, but if you don't fill the form out, we won't know to send you a certificate. And I know a lot of you, there are 98 persons on this chat right now. And you know what you do to me next week? You call, you email, and you say, I was there. I didn't get a certificate. The only way we're going to know that you were there if you fill out that form, and then the office will in turn forward you a certificate of attendance. So please download the chat from now, fill it out at the end, and just hit send, and it goes to the office. Okay, it doesn't come to me, it goes to the office, the administrative assistant. She's going to send you a certificate by the end of, no, this is the end of the month now. So within 2 to 3 weeks, you will get a certificate. And if you don't get it by that time, then you can email and ask if why you didn't get it. Make sure your name is correct and your email address is correct on the form. So thank you, welcome, and over to you, Petal.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Curtis, for your welcome and introduction, and also for clearing the air for a lot of us. We thank you so much. Before we move any further, there are some persons, Doc, who is saying that they're getting that the platform is full, reach its max of 100. I'm not sure what is happening. So there's a lot of person that is out there waiting. Yes, a max of 100. That's what the platform is saying. All right. So Dr. Wendy Fernander, a licensed clinical psychologist. She's the president of the Bahamas Psychological Association. She has worked for several years in outpatient substance use treatment and was also responsible for the Battered Women's Group for the last several years. Dr. Fernander has worked with the psychiatric male inpatient population. She is a fellow. I'm sorry, what just happened? All right. So Dr. Wendy Fernander is a licensed clinical psychologist. She's the president of the Bahamas Psychological Association. She has worked for a number of years in the outpatient substance use treatment and was also responsible for Battered Women's Group. The last several years, Dr. Fernander has worked in the psychiatric male inpatient population. She is a fellow in the treatment of dual diagnosis, substance use, and psychiatric disorders. Presently, she is the ambassador. She is the Bahamas focal point person for mental health and psychosocial support. And so with great pleasure at this time, I invite Dr. Fernander, who will be presenting gender-based violence to us at this time. Dr. Fernander, over to you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Let's just, for a minute, let's just talk about gender-based violence. And when we think about gender-based violence, I know for most of us, the first thing that comes to mind is we think of women and only. But what we would learn, I'm hoping, is that it affects women and men, well, women, girls, and men. So the topic, as I've been given, is gender-based violence in a COVID environment. And as you and the two previous speakers have mentioned, COVID-19 has actually changed a lot of things for us. So COVID-19 pandemic is not just a health issue, but it is a major shock to our societies and our economy. That's according to the UN Women 2020. Added to this public health crisis is the toll that COVID-19 has is the mounting data which suggests that there is an increase in domestic abuse. Okay, and what actually happened, UN Women sees this as an opportunistic infection that's flourishing in the condition that was created by COVID-19. It's been created by COVID-19, which is the isolation, the quarantine, and a whole lot of stuff, unemployment. So that's the environment that has caused this mounting data. So even before COVID-19, however, we know that domestic violence was already one of the greatest human rights violation to women and girls. That's according to the World Health Organization. So data show that all types of violence against women and girls, particularly domestic violence, has intensified. I mean, and so we know that that's the data across globally is showing that. And so we know that that's a serious problem that we have to deal with. And we know that domestic violence is not just physical abuse, but it's verbal abuse, psychological abuse, and then there's financial abuse, so financial deprivation. So this increase in domestic violence is called by UN Women the shadow pandemic. And this is growing as a result of COVID, as I've said. So the shadow simply means that it's because our focus is so much on what's happening with the pandemic, we are not seeing, or we are not acknowledging or recognizing the abuse that's happening that's happening among us. At the onset, Shirley mentioned that when we see our patients, the presentations will help us to be able to recognize some things in our patients, but also in our colleagues among us, because you will learn is that it's no respect of person. So gender-based violence or domestic violence continues to be, and so I'm talking now about, that was my introduction. So let me just tell you about the Bahamas. Continues to be a source of concern in the Bahamas. GBV or gender-based violence is endemic in our communities and constitute a major public health issues in our country, the Bahamas. Okay, so, and this is as a result of structural inequity between the sexes in our laws and our cultural attitude. So the Bahamas leads the Caribbean in reported rates, and it is actually among the 10 top countries in the world. It's one of the countries in the Caribbean that's in the top 10 countries in the world with reported rape cases. So data from 2020 indicate that the number of gender-based violence tripled. That's by 120 they reported for 2020. So ending domestic violence against women is one of the most serious challenges that's facing us, the Bahamas as a country. And not just us, I'm sure this is globally, underreporting remains a major concern. So domestic violence, in a survey that was done by the Gender and Family Affairs in the Bahamas, it states, and forgive me, that's supposed to be victim with a C. It states that during the curfew or before the curfew, 25.9% persons endorsed that before the curfew, they were victims of domestic violence. During the curfew, persons report that 31.9% persons reported that they've been abused during the curfew. So this data indicate that during the curfew, participants who These participants report having been victims of domestic violence. So that's an increase of 11%. So in the case of female respondent, 22.1% were victims of domestic violence prior to the curfew, and 29.9% were victims during the curfew. So what this does is this is telling us that this is just not just the female, the first 11% increase, but it was also the males as well. So now we know that when we look further down, we see that the female respondent who were before the curfew was 22.1%, and during the curfew, it was 29.6% who report domestic violence or domestic abuse during the curfew. So we see that there's been an increase. So what are some of the strategies to help us to identify this thing, this community hazard, this public health crisis called domestic violence or domestic based abuse? First, we have to know that it starts with us. It starts with verbal put down. It starts very innocently, seemingly. It's a verbal put down. So, telling somebody that, just be quiet, just sit down, as to silence their voice. Okay, so starts with that. So that's the verbal. And then it one of the things that makes us susceptible is when there are outdated female roles. The woman is supposed to stay at home, take care of the house, take care of her family, take care of her husband, or even if she's working, she is supposed to be submissive to her husband. And I know that that's a controversial thing, particularly for us in the Caribbean and particularly for us in the church. But we have to look at what submissiveness look like. And for the purpose of this presentation, 25 minutes, I thought I'd just throw it out there. So outdated female roles, we don't have a say in what's happening in our homes and in our families. So controlling behavior, like I said, it starts with verbal put down, be quiet, sit down, shut up, that kind of thing. And the controlling behavior, you can't wear this, you shouldn't put on that, you need to take the airing out of your ears, where are you going, who are you talking to? So if that controlling behavior. And next, another one is possessiveness. You belong to me, like, you don't have, you're my woman, or for some of us, you're my man, so that's that possessiveness. And then there's extreme jealousy. We know that it's in addition to the whole possessiveness, it's like you don't do unless I say you should do something. Okay, and restricting your privileges or restricting what you do and where you go. And then bad temperedness. And sometimes we overlook it and just say this person is temperamental. But those are some of the signs. Those are some of the things that allow us to identify. And then the whole unpredictability. So we know that we don't know who's coming home in the evening or who we will wake up to the following morning. So those are some of the things that says, we can be in a relationship that's susceptible to gender-based violence. So gender-based violence affects 1 in 3 women and 1 in 40 men in their lifetime. It is considered like a global pandemic. Gender-based violence has no economic or social boundaries and affects women and girls from all socio-economic background. It's, as I said at the onset, it's no respect of persons. So we all are susceptible to gender-based violence. And so for us here in the Bahamas, our resources for gender-based violence or for assistance are the Ministry of Social Development, or the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development, the Department of Gender and Family Affairs, the Bahamas Crisis Center, the community counseling and assessment center, the public clinics, the Ministry of Health. So those are some of the facilities that we have where persons who are experiencing gender-based violence can get assistance. So that's the end. My understanding is you will keep your questions until the next person has presented or till everyone has presented. So thank you all so very much.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. We thank you so much, Dr. Fernanda. Very, very interesting and informative. And for me, an eye-opener for some of these revelations. Just to let you all know that tonight our objectives is to state briefly the impact of gender-based violence in the Bahamas and outline the indicators of gender-based violence. Dr. Fernanda just now did number 1 and number 2. She also did our third objective, which is discuss the strategies to address gender-based violence. Another of our objectives is view gender-based violence from a client's perspective. Again, we want to say thank you to Dr. Wendy Fernanda, who presented this topic so ably, and of course, it was very, very informative. And so at this time, we're going to move into our second presenter. Now, let me introduce to you Miss Valdina Tamara Shears. Valdina Tamara Shears is an independent, freelance senior investigative reporter and journalist. She has been a member of the media for just over 20 years and has worked for all 3 daily newspapers in Trinidad and Tobago. Ms. Shears has also written for publications outside of Trinidad and Tobago, government website, local, corporate, and community magazines and newspapers. She is the author of the inspirational biographical book, Free from Mental Bars, Spiritually Surviving Abuse. Ms. Shears is presently a freelance journalist or editor with You Can Have It All, which is a US-based youth digital magazine. And occasionally she writes for Eastern Times community newspaper. And this she's been doing since 2013. She is a mother of 7 and grandmother of 1, and originally from Gonzales Village, Guapo, Point 14. She is a survivor of abuse and domestic violence and represented the Coalition Against Domestic Violence in a television video clip of a group of survivors speaking out on their experiences. The title of that series is Triumph Over Trauma. She has also spoken out through print, radio, social media, and presently has an online petition for a cause that she believes will and can save lives. Ms. Shears is also the founder of the ABA movement, ABA, which is an acronym, and it means All for Bracelet Alerts, and has begun lobbying for the legislative enforcement of GPS tracking bracelets, a corresponding victim app alert, and mandatory counseling for all involved, and as a condition of bail for the abusers. Ms. Shears, who has seen firsthand the adverse psychological impact domestic violence can have on children is in dysfunctional situations, wanted to stress the absolute need for the inclusion of the alerts and counseling to ensure the cycle does not continue. It is her prayer that legislative amendment will occur, read the Domestic Violence Act, and victims and survivors will finally have a first line of defense and possible deterrent to continued abuse after they extricate themselves from unhealthy relationship. She wants us to note that this is the first thought or question that goes through a victim's mind, and that is, can I stay safe from him or her? And who and how will I be protected from him or her? My participants tonight, with such a wonderful introduction. At this time, I present to you Ms. Valdina Tamara Shears. Over to you, Ms. Shears.
Hi, good night. Is everyone hearing me?
I am, yes.
Okay. I thought long and hard about how I was going to start this presentation. And because it is for the Midwives Association, I'm going to start by my experiences I had with midwives. So I had a bittersweet experience on one occasion, and I'm a mom of 7, as said in the introduction. So I've had indirect and direct interactions with midwives, even when I didn't know, because I know that there usually is a midwife in an operating theater whenever you go to deliver. So I'm going to start what I wrote out. In my estimation, my thoughts of a midwife had always been narrow. Most likely, she was just that sometimes calming, sometimes harsh voice one heard during delivery and between bouts of pain, so excruciating that one did not think of seeking out its source. I've had the honor to have been blessed with 7 such experiences. I'm a proud mother of 7 and grandmother of 1. I also hold honorary self-awarded title of mobile midwife. When I talked my eldest daughter through her delivery while she was in labor at hospital and I was in my home, anxiously awaiting the arrival of my first grandchild in August 2018. By this time, I was barely out of my 21-year marriage, which had for the most part been abusive. All of my pregnancies were while I was being abused. Thank God my last delivery was not under the shadow of domestic violence. That daughter, who is now 7 years old, has been the light in all of our lives. She cannot abide anyone swearing or raising their voices in anger. She's our police in that regard. No, mommy, don't say that word, or guys, stop quarreling. She only knows peace. I firmly believe that it had a lot to do with my own experience during her delivery. I remember being induced at 40 weeks and 3 days. I remember my womb being swept twice in the days before. But most of all, I remember the afterbirth being stuck in my passage and a soft voice, it wasn't the doctor, saying, Miss Shares, this will hurt, but we have to do it. I am sorry. I believe it was the midwife. It hurt, I cried, and she held my hand throughout. This had been my second direct interaction with a midwife that I recall vividly. My first was bittersweet. I was 8 months pregnant with my 6th child and facing eviction and homelessness. A number for an apartment stood out on a notice on a building in Point Fortin. I called. I had no money to pay for this place, but I believe I'm always being led by God. The lady had a comforting voice. She said, we have to get you out of where you are before this baby is born. 2 days later, we went to a new apartment. My ex-husband and former abuser did not have any money to pay her, but she allowed us to move in anyway, on the promise that he would have at least 1 month's rent by the end of that month. My kids and I were comfortable, but it did not last long. The kind woman turned out to be a midwife. She turned out to also be the midwife that was in the theater during my daughter's delivery. She too held my hands, but had a sad expression on her face while doing so. She later came to my room and sat on the edge of my bed. I am sorry, honey, but I was advised not to receive any rent money from you, but to ask you to find somewhere else to live. Someone whom I trust told me your husband is involved in criminal activities. If it were just you and the children, I would have let you stay for as long as you can catch yourself. You need to tell your husband he needs to find a new place by month end, she said. She held my hand. I pulled away, turned my back to her, mumbled my thanks to her for her kindness, and I cried myself to sleep. My daughter was born on June the 25th. June has 30 days. I had 5 days to get a new home. I was both thankful for her help and upset that she was telling us to leave. We ended up staying in the bedroom of a Good Samaritan's home with her family, myself and my 6 children. My daughter was 7 days old. I knelt in the living room of that woman's home and I cried out to God to use me to help others, just as I am. Today, on this platform, I see his purpose unfolding. Every day, I see that my experiences, my ordeal was not just for me to learn from, but to help others. Midwives are the helpers in the theater that hold so much unvalidated power and that is often overlooked and underappreciated. I don't say this to gain preferential treatment for any future pregnancies, as I don't intend to have any more. What I can say is that I had the privilege of being taken care of by several compassionate healthcare workers during my years being pregnant and deliveries from 1996 to 2017. That's over half of the 45 years that I have been on this earth. I want to also say hats off to the nurses, doctors, hospital social workers, hospital psychiatrists, and staff who assisted me throughout, and for those who recently stepped in when we had any crisis. As for me having survived several years of abuse, it was only because of my determination to hold on to my source of strength. Knowing that God has always and still is in control, no matter how gloomy, how dismal our situation looked. I also held on to the consolation that He could change any situation or anyone. But I also know now that God does not want us to blame ourselves or be unforgiving, neither does He want us to live in fear. I would like to admonish that you look for signs in your loved ones of depression, sadness, mood swings, etc. Sometimes fear and systematic isolation can cripple one more than a blow or a bullet to a vital limb. I was told I hid my abuse, my utter terror of my abuser well. It was a long-standing rumor amongst my peers, but never addressed to my face until I came out of it. I understand why, but I do not agree with their silence. Abuse thrives on silence and fear. As midwives, can I suggest you form closer relations with the institution's social workers? Or in that moment when one of your emotionally charged patients is holding your hands, ask them if they are really okay. Or go by their bedside and inquire. It takes nothing more than 5 minutes. I thank you for this platform, for this momentous opportunity to speak out of my experiences, transitioning from victim to survivor and now to advocate. What I'll do now is I'll read an excerpt from my book, which is the very last chapter of my book. My name of my book, as mentioned in the introduction, is Free from Mental Bars, Spiritually Surviving Abuse, because abuse is a prison of sorts. So she lives in and with regrets, from looking for love to having him met. The words would have fallen off his lips, smooth like butter.
A little louder.
In her mind, he looked old enough to be her father. In her mind, in his eyes, woman was she. It's a pity he no longer calls her baby. She lives in and with regrets too much to bear, regrets that she can no longer choose to go or to stay, that she is as much a hostage to misguided love as she is to violence, that he has forced her family away and at a great distance. The dirty man she once considered sexy, whose eyeball she wanted to be, she should have seen as a father figure, closer in age to her biological daddy. She hides behind a smile and a flood of unshed inner tears, holding in her fears. Does anyone care? Mommy, mother, wish I could truly say sorry. Sorry for making you worry. But God has to take over now, mommy, because it's no longer just about me. The bruises will heal, the wounds made by words will scab over. But mortal scars are left on her soul, maybe forever and ever. My world has closed into just a few he allows. I want to speak out, but I know the feel of the blow as he come in. I have to smile, but my head and my heart's been hurting for quite a while. Fear keeps me here, as if I have grown roots. The fear that one day he will make good on his threats to shoot. Oh God, help me now. I wish I could warn my girlfriends on how to be a little girl even when big woman feelings kick in. How to see the wolf under the sheep clothing. How to say yes, I am a little girl. So stop, pause. I refuse to be one of your little girls lost. You dirty man, you dirty man. Leave the people beneath them and rule.
Awesome.
You dirty
Awesome.
man, you know it's right.
Doc, can you check if
So
she's
leave
back?
the people
Can you check if she's back on the waiting list? No? This was an awesome piece of work. Awesome. I'm so sorry that, she got bumped out, hoping that she will rejoin us soon.
I'm gonna pause the recording just for a minute.
The persons who will be doing the question and answer segment, just to share with you briefly, a little research that I did for myself, that violence against women and girls is one of the most prevalent human rights violations in the world. It knows no social, economic, and national boundaries. Worldwide, an estimated 1 in 3 women will experience physical or sexual abuse in her lifetime. And this is according to UNFPA. Gender-based violence, it says, undermines the health, dignity, security, and autonomy of its victims. Yet, it remains shrouded in a culture of silence. Victims of violence can suffer sexual and reproductive health consequences, including forced and unwanted pregnancies, unsafe abortions, traumatic fistula, sexually transmitted infections, including HIV, and even death. So we realize that gender-based violence, and especially in this COVID environment, is worldwide and a serious issue. So at this time, are there any questions? Ms. Kayan Matthews and Kathian will be doing our question and answer segment, and Dr. Fernanda is here. We can always pose those questions to her. So at this time, I invite our Kayan and Kathian to do that segment for us. Ladies.
Kathy Ann, any questions?
Kathian, you're hearing us? Kayan, you're hearing us?
Yes, hello.
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
I had to switch it back from stereo speaker to, that was the problem.
Any
Okay,
questions?
so I saw 2 questions thus far. One is if there are any statistics available for Trinidad and Tobago. And the second question, do we collect data on gender-based violence at our hospitals? Are questions on gender-based violence in our admission questionnaires or pre- and postnatal visits?
Okay, those those particular questions are not specific to Dr. Fernandez's presentations. I don't know if anyone from Trinidad has any idea of what the statistics look like in Trinidad as it relates to gender-based violence.
Not sure about the
Right.
statistics, but the question on the admission questionnaires, pre and postnatal, if we are asking our clients if they've been abused or threatened by anyone, what we use, we have at the antenatal clinics, we have the little cards, so that if you come across a client and you suspect that they are being well, they can't speak freely, or you see the person who is with them is, threatening or overbearing, or, if you pick up anything, we have these little cards that we can pass to our clients. They're called palm cards. And on them, we have information, contact numbers that they can call, etc. So it's palm cards. So when we hand them anything, it's within our palm and we hand it to them out of sight of whoever's with them, so that they can take that card, and it's tiny, so they can stick it anywhere so that the person doesn't see, and use it then to get more information. Because on those cards, we have information on the numbers, hotline numbers, that they can use to call if, they so need help. So that it's more or less, we pick up on, the interaction with the client, so that we can offer them some assistance in that way. We can't really ask them if they're being abused or threatened by anyone if the person is there. But when we use our skills, our counseling skills, that, and we notice that someone needs our help, we can use the palm cards to give them that information so that they can get help.
Okay. I don't know from any other countries if persons would like to add. Dr. Fernanda, would you like to add something there?
Remember, for gender-based violence, because it's underreported, a lot of what the person from Trinidad and Tobago mentioned, observation. I think the thing that's important for us is observing, being very observant, and also listening to what they do not say. Because more often than not, they will not acknowledge unless that person is at the very end of their rope. And I think Valdine, as we listen to her share, for the number of years that she's been in that relationship, one would wonder how is it that she's stayed in that relationship for so long and no one kind of helped. Because oftentimes you don't come out and say, okay, I'm being abused. And so you have to be very observant. You have to listen to what they do not say. And the questions aren't going to be, are you being abused? It may be what's available to them. Like, how do they get to clinic? It may be, how are they going to provide those questions that midwives ask, and then you would be able to deduce from that based on what they say. Like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to be able to buy my baby's clothes. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this. And it may just be a slip, and then quickly they go back put their guards up. So that's how we're going to know very often. And I mean, Caribbean people are very proud people, but it's across the board, very often people don't share that they are a victim of abuse.
I just want to add that in the Bahamas, actually, we have added that to the SIP form. So our revised SIP form has something on gender-based violence, and the midwife is supposed to ask the client about it in every trimester. So sometimes, in the first trimester, when you see the client, maybe the husband or the boyfriend might have been there, or the abuser might have been there, but the second trimester, third trimester, and so you have to tick it. And sometimes you have to be innovative about the way you ask the question. So, sometimes you ask, is there any violence in the home? Anybody? And I know at one time, one of the clients said, the boyfriend was there. He say, yeah, this woman is be abusing me. You need to talk to her. So, and so you need, and so sometimes you get an answer the way you didn't expect it. And you say, anything you say, she want to raise her hand. She just lucky the way I am, right? But if you ask the question, particularly when the male is not there, and then you look to see how she answers. It's not what she answers, like Dr. Fernandez says, because some, like you say, we proud. We don't want nobody beating up on us, but it's the way. And so sometimes you pick up on clues that way. And if you take a detailed social history there again, and I know we have gotten away from doing those home visits, but doing those home visits in the antenatal period also, and of course in the postnatal, but in the antenatal period as well, you can pick up on some cues. And so all of those would give us ideas of gender-based violence and try to follow that rabbit trail, so to speak, if you pick up on something. But the palm card is another good way, like Trinidad is doing. Yep. Any other islands? I've heard from Trinidad, I've heard from the Bahamas. Any other islands? You want to raise your hands? We can let you unmute your mic that you would like to share what is being done. If not, Kathy Ann, any other questions?
Yes, there's another question for Dr. Fernanda. Dr. Fernanda, are the strategies you mentioned known policies within the healthcare? And what is the ratio discrepancies for gender-based violence in the Bahamas you mentioned is underreported?
Okay. Yes, the strategies are known within the healthcare facilities. It's known. In fact, there's been a campaign for the last several years. I think it would have started just before we had our last referendum, and has continued. And last year, well, 2019, after Dorian, a lot of information. So we've had a pandemic before the pandemic, and so we know that kind of crisis, the disaster that hit us, we know that also contributed to or led to a lot of domestic violence because people were frustrated, angry. So wherever that is, wherever there's frustration, anger, anxiety, depression, deprivation, people strike out. So there was a lot of public campaign, a lot of information on television. One of the things that was mentioned was that I'm the mental health and psychosocial support point person. So we talked a lot about that. We used the airwaves, we use print media, we use social media as best as we can to get the information across. As to the percentage of underreporting, we don't know what the exact percentage is. That's why it's called underreporting, and it's not. And the thing to remember is that it's not unique to us. It's across the board. It's globally. But we have mentioned it in our document that this is the case for us because we know, like was mentioned by Dr. Curtis, and you all are aware, is we know there are times when you can tell. We've talked about those women who come before you as midwives and who may be, they may be likely to want to share. But what about those women whose life is that I don't work, but I depend on a man to ensure that I have my nails done, my hair did, and gas in my vehicle and I drive around. I live a life of leisure, but I know that I'm being abused. But for this, I would give my life. So yeah, we don't have an exact number, but I can tell you it is what they say globally is that for every one person that acknowledges or admits and that you find out, there could be about 5 to 6 persons who have not, and as many as 10. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any further questions.
Doctor, you're trying to say something. Can you unmute? Right.
Are there any further questions? Maybe somebody want to raise their hands and ask the question. They didn't want to type it. Nadia Taylor, can you unmute your mic?
Hi, good night.
Nay.
Everyone hearing? All right, I'm from Jamaica. I had a client the other day, right? She waited until her clinic was finished. It wasn't an antenatal clinic where it's her clinic that was to be seen. So she was out there and she was quite distressed. And she keep insisting on the support staff she need to speak with the nurse. When she did come into the office, so she started to say, "Nurse, I'm going to tell you something, and I want to know that it's sure that it's going to be in this room." I said, "Of course. The fact that you're in here by yourself and it's me and you, it only goes through the window because the window is open, but it stays here." So she's saying, "I think I did something. I don't know what's happening." So she started to blame herself and started to, try to deflect the reason for why she was being abused. So I said, "Hold on. What happened to you?" So her partner decided that leading up to the day she came to me, 2 days prior to that, he's going to get into an argument with her about something that she thought was very unnecessary. And she said, okay. So she tried to apologize and, try not to be on that angry side. By the very next day, he came back with the same argument, even though they trashed it out. Then he started to choke her. This is a pregnant woman, early pregnancy, first trimester. He started to choke her. Then he started to curse her about the pregnancy and she's not really pregnant because she's not really showing. She's about 12 weeks or so. And then he started to put his hand down into her mouth. I don't know what he's trying to do, really, but he was physically restraining her. And his mother came in to render some assistance to her, she said. And then that's how the altercation subsided. Afterwards, she started to tell me that he doesn't give her money because he don't want her to go anywhere, So he restricts everything: the amount of food she eats, what she wears, if she gets money, if she have to go somewhere, he must know about it, things like that. So I said to her, okay, have you ever heard about domestic violence or abuse? I said you're in a cycle of abuse. So I started telling her about when all is well and you're sweet and nice and dandy. And then afterwards, something triggers an argument. And then the argument escalates into a physical altercation. And then you're blamed for whatever the altercation was, why you were abused by the abuser, and so on and so forth. So she's saying, him not really like that, the defending the abuser syndrome. So him not really like that. And it's because of something. I said, honey, you're a beautiful young girl. Yes, you're pregnant. Do you have family? So we're in Jamaica. For the Jamaicans, she live in Westmoreland, right? And she's in St. Andrew. So you know the distance. She therefore from everybody. So she have no support at all because of how far she is. Her family, her life, everything is like on the other side of the island, basically. So I'm saying to her, what is it that you want to do? Because I can say anything at all I want. I'm not there. I'm not in this situation. Is there something that you would like to do? And based on what you want to do, then we can work from there. She said, all right, she's going to go home. I said, home to Westmoreland? I said, did you carry your bags with you? No, she didn't. I said, is your partner at home? No, him gone to work. I said, if you're going to go home, it must be today. And it must be before he reaches back home. So that by the time him notice you're missing, you're already in Westmoreland. Then I said to her, did you introduce him to your family in Westmoreland? She said, no, him don't know where she come from. So him don't know Westmoreland. So I said, okay, that sound like you can go home without any eventualities. She's saying, all right, she going home, but she don't have the fare to go home. And the bus fare is about $2,000 or so when you work out the whole commute, right? To the amount of buses that she's going to take and the distance to travel. So between myself and my colleagues, we came up with the fare. And I said to her, let me tell you something. Nobody is deciding for you what you're going to do. But if you decide to go home, I'm giving you the fare to go home. You see, if you don't go home, I want back my money. Because you are the one who have to make a choice. All right. And she left. I took her number, Couple days after that, she called me and she telling me a story. Boy, nurse, I said, are you in Westmoreland? No, nurse. I said, where are you? She's still in St. Andrew. I said, okay, what is happening? Um, you know, his mother talked to him and his mother kind of have a heart problem and then me keep her company and me are the reason why she have something to look forward to and me just want to stay and since his mother talked to him everything is okay. I said, look here, child, you're a very young girl and clearly very inexperienced. Let me tell you some words of wisdom. An abuse is a cycle which have a sweet part. Is a sweet part you start over. Okay? You are going to have to decide what it is you're going to do if you fall into a situation like that again. And let me tell you, I want back my money.
Thank you very much, Nadia, for that scenario that really paints a perfect picture of how the cycle starts, right? That was an excellent scenario, and it will be interesting to see what the end results would be for that particular situation. And one thing too, you would probably needed to have given us some contact information for like the police or the social services or something, if that should happen again, so that she don't show up to the clinic looking for bus fare again. Kayan, your hand is up. Matthews, unmute your mic. Kayan. Kayan, we're not hearing you. Your mic is unmuted, but we're not hearing you. Okay, I see a question that is asking, are there any data collection tool used in the healthcare system specifically for gender-based violence? Remember we said that it's a part of our SIP form. So the data is collected because it's on the SIP form. For those who may not be familiar with the SIP form is a computer-based program. So every question that you ask the patient is actually entered into the computer program. So if you wanted to collect data on antenatal clients with gender-based violence, you should be able to just go into the SIP and retrieve that information from the antenatal perspective. Now, I'm not sure about the other clinics. Petal?
Ken, yes, your hand is still up, Ken. And your mic is unmuted. Susan Samuel's hand is up. Go ahead and unmute, Susan.
Hello, can you
Good
hear me?
night.
Good
Yes,
night.
yes, we're hearing you.
Night.
I was wondering if you can give me any statistics in terms of domestic violence towards men, because I don't hear much about that.
Dr. Fernanda?
Yes, you're right, you haven't heard, but what I mentioned was that the statistics that I gave for the Bahamas was 1 in 40. Then it's globally, it's reported that 1 in 3 women over their lifetime, and 1 in 40 men through their lifetime would have experienced gender-based violence. The statistics that I gave that was specific to the Bahamas, particularly last year, COVID, 2020, was that 21% persons reported, and forgive me, I'm not looking at the slide, 21.9% had reported having been abused prior to the curfew, when we had the curfew, and then it was 29.0, I think, that was, and out of that was between men and women. So it wasn't, we did not have it separated, but the genders, we just knew that it was everybody together. But then when we did it, pull out the women, we had an increased number that says, so I suppose if I wanted to be smart, I could try and extrapolate from that what the percentages, but I don't envision doing that. But obviously, what you're laughing. Obviously, what we know is that while men are victims of gender-based violence, they are less likely to be than females, because what it implies is power. So yeah, so they're less likely to be, but they are also victims, most definitely.
Okay, thank you, doctor. Any other comments? Any other question? Okay.
I'm seeing a question here, but it looks as if the person direct messaged me, but I'm going to put it out. Let me see if I can find it again.
Okay.
The question basically asked who sets the standards for the management. Oh, I can't find the question now. It was a direct message. Hold on. Okay, who sets the guidelines and principles or standards to govern management of gender-based violence in the Caribbean? They want to know if we follow the American standards or others.
We have signed on the Caribbean. I know the Bahamas has, and I will venture to say that other countries in the Caribbean, we've signed on to these international ordinances, and so the UN is one of those, and so they have essentially set the standards for what this gender-based violence is about and what it looks like. And I suppose you would see, those of you in different islands, you would see that our people kick up a fuss a lot of times because we know when we had the referendum, our people were like, okay, they can't dictate to us, and it didn't look like gender-based inequality to us. I mean, and when I say us, I am not included in that, but it's the Bahamas, it's the Bahamian people. And it didn't look like an equality to us. And so, and I know that this is not unique to us, because I've read the news from other Caribbean islands, and they too were going through some of the same things that we were going through. So we have signed on to these different treaties. And so these are what they say to us, that this is what it looks like. And so we fight some time, and then they, so they set it for us.
All right. Well, that particular referendum was talking about
citizenship,
sexual abuse in marriages.
Right.
Correct.
And sexual abuse. And then it was a big thing in this last government when one of the ladies who was a pastor didn't think that a husband could sexually abuse or rape his wife. And then, then the liberal women had the hissy fit, and they went hysterical. And then the church women silently spoke and say they believe, So it's, and I know it's not unique to us, so we can be candid about it. It's not unique to us, but she came out and she didn't think.
Yeah, it's catch-22.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, thank you, Doctor. Any other?
Anything?
Any other Caribbean island want to give your perspective on the topic, gender-based? We have some time. Anybody from Guyana, St. Lucia? St. Kitts, right? Want to give your view or your perspective on this very heated topic. And you'll notice in the chat, the evaluation form is being posted. Kindly remember to fill them out, as Dr. had said earlier. All right, gender-based violence, we heard from somebody in Jamaica already.
All right. Let's take it to the vote of thanks then, Petal.
All right. Suzanne, your hand is up again.
Just 1 second before you do the vote of thanks, Petal.
Okay.
I was just on the phone to Michelle. She does apologize. She was trying to get back in.
Okay.
She lost connectivity.
Hold on, Suzanne. Hold on. Just mute your mic for me.